these comments about Ibrahim, how he's supposedly using the gold reserves to provide his own private security. And let me just say, first of all, that's not true. Second of all, if it was true, let's be honest, wouldn't it be somewhat justified considering the fact that they continue to make attempts on his life? I mean, they just recently made another failed attempt on his life. That's probably why they're upset and why they're now going out of their way to bring it to the attention of the national public, to try and create this narrative, not unlike what we saw happen with Libya and Gaddafi, because Ibrahim has had that type of impact in West Africa when we're talking about not only uplifting Burkina Faso, but then uniting West African countries like Mali and Niger so that they can combat Western imperialism and the NATO allies that try to oppress them.
The United States and France are determined to do to Captain Traoré what they did to so many others. In Burkina Faso, to the great Thomas Sankara, in the Congo, to the great Patrice Lumumba, and so many other leaders that they have dispensed with extreme prejudice because their own interests were threatened by an African leader who's actually governing in the interests of his own people and not of the empire.
All right. Welcome back to This Week in Africa, a collaborative effort between the Authentic African Platform and the one and only Gloria Ayo, where we break down this week's breaking news and its impact on Pan-Africanism and Africa's independence. Today, we dive into the ongoing discussion around the AES, in particular, Burkina Faso. We talk about the foiled coup in Burkina Faso and the global protests standing in solidarity with Ibrahim Traoré. We're also going to talk about some other critical Pan-African updates. But before we do, let us do some introductions. So let's start with my co-host. She'll do her introduction and I'll introduce myself.
Well, hello, my name is Gloria Ayo. I'm the creator and host of The African Story. What I do is I talk about history throughout Africa. I pick, different things, especially things that are historic. For instance, what happened on this day in a certain year. And I try to make it as infotaining as possible. And thankfully, we've been able to, get African history out there through this style. I'm happy to be here. I think this is my third week. And yeah, I'm very excited. I always look forward to Thursdays. So thank you for having me again.
Absolutely. And I will say because of that content is the reason why I wanted to have Gloria on as a reoccurring guest, because she has the deep knowledge of what's happening and the historical context, which is helpful. So my name is Joe Hatagwa. I am the founder of AuthenticAfrican.com and all things Authentic African across all platforms. We sell products on the e-commerce store that are ethically sourced and handmade. That's what's available on the website. And then also at the same time, I have the platform bringing together people from Africa and the diaspora with three main goals: to get people to visit, move, and invest on the continent of Africa. All right, so today we are going to get into what has been happening in Burkina Faso and around the world in support of Burkina Faso. I want to first play a video from a military leader from Burkina Faso explaining the attempted coup and foiled plot, and then we will then talk about some of the what led to all of the protests, and we'll look at some of the protest videos as well. So we'll play this video and we'll have some commentary on the other side.
The meticulous work of the intelligence services would reveal a major plot in preparation against our country, the ultimate goal of which is to sow total chaos with a view to placing the country under the supervision of an international organization capable of regaining control in 10 or 20 years, depending on the instigators. Sensitive information was passed to the terrorists with a view to intensifying attacks against the fighting forces and civilians, with the aim of sparking a revolt against the authorities.
Okay, so I wanted to give that context. So, there's been a lot of talks about coup attempts in Burkina Faso. This is one of the few times where they've acknowledged that there was an attempted coup and it was foiled, and that there was information given to a terrorist that attempted to overthrow Ibrahim Traoré. Now, there's a lot of speculation, informed speculation about who was involved in this plot. Many people think it's folks from Western-backed militia sources, etc. But before we won't do any speculation here, but I'd love to get your thoughts at least on the coup, and then we'll definitely talk about the protests that have shortly followed. But what are your thoughts on the coup attempt and this response by the military of Burkina Faso to talk about it publicly?
Yes, and it's good they're talking about it, and this highlights the importance of history.
Yep.
You know, when people say, well, and I get that every now and then. And I see, you know, people who do what I do also get comments like that. Let it go. You're spreading hate. Move on. But what they don't realize, first of all, Africa has the most suppressed history of any continent.
Mm-hmm.
Africa also has the darkest history of any continent. So yes, we have some great things to share, but there are more urgent things that are still keeping Africa where it is today. So this is why we need to talk about, you know, what has happened in the past, because this is exactly the reason the entire world is standing up for this man. Okay, so when people say move on, let go of the history, this is exactly why. People are more aware. So the military coming forward, you know, they're doing that. It's a proactive thing. Do you know what I mean? You have to get ahead of the threat. You have to get ahead of the attempt, so that they will know the whole world. You have to cry out. And this is why everybody's rallying around Traoré, because they spoke up. You know, we are aware of what was done to Patrice Lumumba, if we're talking history. Thomas Sankara, of the same Burkina Faso. Sylvanus Olympio. We're very aware. We're very much aware. These are not conspiracy theories. These are historical facts, and people are awake now. So yes, I'm very much with the military for speaking up.
Absolutely. And I'll add to that, you know, obviously history repeats itself, right? And it's very clear that, you know, what has happened in the past is very likely to happen again if we do not collectively organize and work together to keep it from happening again. And so, you know, yeah, as you mentioned, you know, the military coming out and speaking about this, I think led to these protests. And so I do want to mention that, you know, obviously Burkina Faso's revolutionary leader, Ibrahim Traoré, is galvanizing African unity, a deeply troublesome development for imperialists, according to many people who work on these kinds of things. You know, there's arguments that, you know, this is targeted based on, you know, foreign national intelligence agencies, which have been used previously to do coups in countries where they weren't aligned with the West and where the West was going, right? So you mentioned a few leaders, specifically Thomas Sankara. Some people sometimes mention Gaddafi. You know, obviously, even Kwame Nkrumah, although he was overthrown while on a journey away from Ghana, he was not allowed back into his country of origin ever again until after he passed away, right? And so, you know, the United States always mentions we're not involved in regime change anymore. But what you notice is that not overtly, but likely covertly. And so this may not have been the U.S. It may have been the West. It may have been other members of the West. But it does look like there was definitely some intelligence given to some terrorist individuals. And luckily, the Burkina Faso government and military found out and foiled the coup. Now, once this announcement was made, you started hearing from folks around the continent talking about their support. And then organizations started to follow after that. So what I want to do is quickly play some commentary from Julius Malema, who is a firebrand in South Africa, probably one of the more well-known members of government, who happens to not be the president of the country, but is known for his stance and his approach to, you know, African liberation and the need for Africa to have, you know, all of its minerals owned and land owned by Africans. And so he's unapologetic and definitely stirs up a little bit of trouble, even in his own country. So I am going to, in a moment, as it finishes processing, I'll play the video But in the meantime, you know what makes more sense, actually, since it's taken a while to process? What I'll do is I'll play some other videos from other protests so you can hear directly from folks that were in protest, specifically in the UK. I'll start with that. Let me just give you some context. So African Stream posted a video about people coming out all over the world in support of Burkina Faso and its revolutionary leader, Ibrahim Traoré. So in a video amongst a crowd at Wednesday's rally outside the US Embassy in London, we're going to hear from some of the participants about what motivated them to hit the streets and to, bring out these signs and, express their support for Ibrahim Traoré. So I'll play that, and then we will come back with some other commentary from Julius Malema.
And I'm saying, brother, we are ready to come and fight for Burkina Faso. Black power! This is the reality of the time that we're living in today.
So you look beautiful. Why are you at the US Embassy today?
Because Ibrahim Traoré, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, making Africa equivalent great again.
Amen. Well, I'm sorry for language because he's again one of us, but during this is not new. It's not old. It's not a new thing. Back in the days during slavery, you always had like that one guy, that was saying, General, we initiate, like, yes sir, yes sir.
He represents the liberation of our people, and of course the Americans and the French and the British and the rest of these Europeans. They are determined to once again try to stymie, try to curtail the movement of the people of God towards our total liberation.
So yeah, I mean, and I guess I want to add one point of clarity. I know I mentioned that the attempted coup and the military of Burkina Faso expressing that was one of the reasons for the protest. Also, the statements by Langley, as expressed in this video, who is a senior military official for the United States government, and happens to be a black face on this problem, I think is partly why there was also some outrage by folks, because it looks like they're using him to be the face of this, so that it doesn't, so they can attempt to look like they're not as involved, right? If you have a black face on it and dealing with a quote unquote black problem, I think it always allows people to feel like they can be shielded from any culpability. But yeah, love to get your thoughts on the protest that we just saw there in the UK and what kind of led to these protests.
Yeah, what a time to be African. I don't think I have ever been prouder to be African. General Langley thought it was just another day on the job. Mm-hmm. He had no clue that Africans had enough of Western interference, especially when it has to do with African affairs, right? The situation got worse, or it's been intensified now that Burkina Faso has signed a new industrial mining license, or given away an industrial mining license to a Russian company. Mm-hmm. So this is emphasizing that Burkina Faso has no interest in Western alliances. And I'm okay with, the nationalization of foreign-owned industrial mines across Africa, because it's time for Africans to eat from the good of the land, because we own it. We own everything, right? And thankfully, as we can see in the videos, there's a growing sentiment across African nations to assert greater control over their own resources and reduce this dependency on France, on America, on the UK. The public support for Traoré shows that all Black people, regardless of whether they're African American, they're Jamaican, they want sovereignty for Africa. It's about self-determination. And African countries who I'm hoping are watching this example, this is what happens when you do what you're supposed to do for your people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, African countries really have to reevaluate their relationships with foreign power. I want to add, though, that a lot of major news outlets are staying away from this story. I don't know if you noticed it.
I did, yes.
It's not accidental.
Mm-hmm.
The selective coverage is a form of opposition. When thousands of Africans flood the streets to defend their sovereignty, you know, they go against Western meddling. They're supporting a young military leader who's challenging neocolonial power. That they don't think that's newsworthy. And that's proof that these media do control the narratives. They don't just report events, they curate the events. They decide what should get amplified. They decide what should be suppressed. But they forget that social media is the new media. So the people are much more aware.
Yep.
Imagine a leader like Traoré. He's expelling French troops. He's reclaiming gold mines. He's aligning with Russia instead of NATO. And he's being cheered I mean, Africans are rallying around him.
Yes.
Why would they want to talk about him positively? All we see are, you know, stories of human rights abuse, etc. But this is not making news. You're supposed to just cover the story. You know, what he's doing is disrupting the traditional narrative that Africa must be led by Western-approved, IMF-dependent people. So instead of showing Burkina Faso mass support, they're choosing to just focus on the negatives. And that's just so sad. But it's a new day. Africans are awake.
Absolutely. And I think this is a unifying factor. You know, we've been talking about, you know, obviously the platform Authentic African is about unifying folks that have African descent, however you came to wherever you are, right? Through, you know, this transatlantic slave trade, through your own, under your own volition, your, you know, foundational Black American, whatever it might look like. And then Africans on the continent. And I think we've always been operating in silos. And this seems to be one of those topics that are now bringing folks together. So on that, before we get into the Malema discussion, because I do want to give time to hear his points that he made, I do want to show some other video, because to your point, you mentioned that the news outlets are not reporting this, but you guys have to see the sheer size of some of these protests. So I want to show you what it looked like in France, Burkina Faso, and then some of the protests in the United States. If there was protests around anything else, it would be covered by all the major news outlets. And you find that it's not happening here. So we're going to start with France. We're going to then go to the US, and then we're going to go to the Burkina Faso protests. We'll give a little bit more commentary before we move into the Malema discussion. So I just wanted to show that, right? Especially the size of the protests in France. I mean, I can't estimate that number, but it looks like over 500,000 people, maybe even closer to, you know, 1 million. That many people coming together to protest what the West is looking to do to involve themselves on the continent. It's something like I haven't seen before. This is akin to many other large uprisings, but I don't know if I've seen anything like this before in response to something relating to Africa. And I think that's probably the most interesting and compelling piece to this. And the fact that the news isn't reporting on this is telling. So any additional thoughts on that after we just watched that and specifically those videos?
I just can't be more proud. I'm just so excited. And, you know, Traoré should be extremely proud of himself, you know, him being a unifier in this way. We've had, you know, it's been so unfortunate how our race has been the most fragmented. right? Tyrese even commented on this. And just to have somebody unify Black people throughout the world is it's such a great time to be alive. Like, this is what we read about in books, and to just be able to witness this. And it's for us by us protecting our own. It's a great time. I'm so proud.
Yeah, and on that note, we'll go back to Africa. So I mentioned the firebrand that is Julius Malema, who unfortunately was defeated in the last presidential election in South Africa. And the government that won decided to form a coalition with the Democratic Alliance, which is, so the EFF, which is Nelson Mandela's party, is now under new leadership. And of course, they decided to align with the Democratic Alliance, which is not Julius Malema, which I think was a mistake.
I think you meant the ANC.
The ANC. What did I say? EFF?
Yeah.
Yes, the ANC. Yeah. They aligned with the DA, the Democratic Alliance, which is the majority Caucasian group in South Africa, who have very different views of what should be happening in South Africa. And so I appreciate that, you know, Julius Malema is still fighting for South Africans. So I wanted to play a little bit of a video from him and his support for Ibrahim Traoré. You know, and this, he says, we are all Ibrahim Traoré. So it's a powerful message of solidarity with Burkina Faso's revolutionary president sent out by Julius Malema himself. He's the leader of South Africa's Pan-African movement, the EFF, which is who I wrongly referenced earlier. But it comes after Ouagadougou revealed that they had thwarted another coup plot and the recent slander thrown at Traoré in the U.S. Senate. So Malema also denounced the U.S.'s efforts to destabilize Burkina Faso by insinuating its leadership was using gold reserves to pay for its own security, because that was what the insinuation of Langley was. So I'm going to go to these comments by Julius Malema, and then we'll give some commentary on the other side.
America must never tell us what to do. The same United States, which is furious at being cut.
Sorry, let's try that again.
America must never tell us what to do. The same United States, which is furious at being cut off from the riches of Burkina Faso, cannot tell us what to do. We stand with Captain Traoré. We stand with Traoré because we know that Traoré stands for the unity of Africa. We are Traoré, and Traoré is all of us. If they kill Traoré, you must know they would have created another wound in the continent of Africa. We must defend him the same way we defend the unity of Africa. We must defend China for defying the USA and telling the USA to go to hell because they don't understand how the tariffs works. Donald Trump is an enemy of himself and all of us. And he must know the EFF is not scared of him. The EFF is not scared of Israel. The EFF is not scared of Morocco. The EFF is not scared of the imperialist forces. The EFF will stand on the side of the people of DRC, the people of Sudan, and the people of Sahrawi.
Very fiery. You know, you may not agree with everything that Julius Malema says, but just the general sentiment. What are your thoughts there on what he was saying there in terms of Africa unity and we are all Ibrahim Traoré?
Yeah, Malema has always been an advocate of unity. You know, even with some of these sad cases of xenophobia, he's always still been about African unity and just showing love, you know, to one another. And for him to back what he says, especially in a moment like this, to come out, you know, that speaks volumes. Malema has a very strong voice, and for him to be heard, you know, emphasizing the importance of standing behind Traoré it just says that he puts his money where his mouth is. Or how do you say it? You put money where your mouth is.
Yep, that's it.
Yeah. So I'm very excited that, you know, he spoke. I expected him to speak. I know he would anyway. So yeah, great job, Malema. And he's not about that Western, you know, suppression. He's never, especially because he's been in the news lately, you know, with the Elon and Donald Trump accusations, of racism towards whites in South Africa, and he's been very vocal. They've trolled him. He's trolled harder. So yeah, it's very nice hearing his voice again.
Absolutely. And look, I'm an advocate for African independence. So I would love to see that we are able to broker deals with ourselves on the continent and not have to choose the West over the East, but choose Africa. But it does show a diversification and better management of resources, the way that Burkina Faso is moving. And so I think Burkina Faso has made the deal, as you mentioned, with Russia. Malema in this video mentions China and protecting China. I think our goal for Africa should be Africa. But I think anytime Africans take their take destiny into their own hands and are operating against colonial powers and suppression, sometimes that might mean making friends of folks that are not necessarily the most exciting to have as partners, right? I mean, I just do want to mention that, just so we don't get hit with this is Russian propaganda. I just want to be very clear that happens a lot when you start talking about these topics and these subjects. And so we want to be very clear that we're happy to see Africa supporting Africans, and sometimes that means that they do deals with folks that may seem like they might be the enemies of the enemies are our friends. That's kind of how they're looking at it, right? And so that might not be the way we view things. So if we're playing videos from folks who are speaking about alignment with Eastern back folks, I just want you to know that we may not agree with that element, but we agree with African unity and African independence. So just wanted to put that out there. So now I do want to, any final thoughts on the attempted coup and the protest and unity for Ibrahim Traoré?
Let's keep it going. We're not relenting, even when it seems as if everything is quiet. Let's just keep being a unified front. And I do want to say to Traoré, you're enjoying so much goodwill right now. Please just keep making us proud. Don't let the people of Africa down. Keep going. The entire world is behind you. I love to see it.
Absolutely. And let me add that there was a message that Ibrahim Traoré put out to express his gratitude. And he actually said, I would like to express my gratitude to all peace-loving, freedom-loving patriots and Pan-Africanists who rallied around the world on Wednesday, April 30th, 2025, to support our commitment and our vision for a new Burkina Faso and a new Africa, free from imperialism and neocolonialism. Your active solidarity and this demonstration of sympathy strengthens our conviction that the fight we are waging for a fairer and more equitable world is justified. We will never bend our backs in the face of adversity. We will stand firm until our peoples are truly emancipated. With you, we are certain that victory over the forces of evil is at hand. Together in solidarity, we will defeat imperialism and neocolonialism for a free, dignified, and sovereign Africa. This guy is something else. I really appreciate how he immediately meets the moment and knows how to communicate all the things that need to be communicated. And so with that, that concludes that portion of the live stream in terms of talking about the AES and specifically what's been happening around the coup attempt and the subsequent protest around the world. We will continue to follow these stories and continue to bring you guys more updates as we get more. Next, we want to move to Namibia. We do have a newly elected president of Namibia, first female president. And can you say her name for me, please, Gloria, so I don't mess it up and butcher it?
Oh Lord. I want to be forgiving Namibians. Nandi Ndaitwa.
Yes. And so we're going to cover two stories. One where she's taken swift action, and another one, a positive action has been taken. So I just want to pull up the first story and talk about swift action taken, was kind of more of a negative situation that happened there, but some swift action was taken, and then we're going to get to a positive story after that. So let's first get to, so first of all, let's just be clear, there's going to be a review of Namibia's female president. The first story is the agriculture minister sacked for SA allegations, and then of course we're going to talk about how education is going to be free next year. So the first one is they were hit by its first major scandal after the agriculture minister was dismissed following allegations of SA of a 16-year-old girl 5 years ago. He was arrested and denied bail after allegedly attempting to bribe the victim. He faces multiple charges, including SA, kidnapping, and obstruction of justice. The case has sparked political backlash and raised concern over gender violence, which, with over 4,800 cases reported last year, it tests the leadership of the new president just weeks into her term. But let's watch this video, hear the story, and give some commentary on the other side.
Namibia's newly elected government has been rocked by its first major political scandal. Just weeks after President Netembo Nandi-Ndaitwah took office as the country's first female head of state, now the country's agriculture minister, Albert Hengari, has been sacked after being accused of raping a 16-year-old girl 5 years ago. The 59-year-old was arrested over the weekend after police say that he tried to bribe the victim, now 21, to withdraw her complaint. Hengari, a former academic, appeared in a Windhoek magistrate's court on Monday, where he was formally charged and denied bail. Authorities say that he poses a flight risk and could attempt to influence witnesses. He faces multiple charges, including rape, kidnapping, assault, and obstruction of justice. He remains in custody, awaiting his next court appearance, scheduled for the 3rd of June. For President Nandi-Ndaitwah, who campaigned for gender equality and transparency, this scandal presents her first major test in office.
And she acted swiftly, denied him bail, right? So, or her administration did. So it seems as if she's at least, you know, as you mentioned, putting her money where her mouth is, right? Walking the walk and talking the talk. But any thoughts that you have on this particular case and how it was handled?
Okay. First of all, I'm extremely excited for Namibia because SA has been on the rise. It's, you know, and it's gone on for years without swift action taken, at least not of this magnitude. So to see a female president making history in more ways than one, you know, it's not just about, you know, being a female president. She's only one of two on the continent right now, but just to be able to take action. You know, she said she would do these things and she's doing them. You know, this is just so great. This is justice for victims. And I am saddened by the fact that this man, and of course, you know, is innocent until they prove otherwise. But it's just sad because, I want to digress real quick. So the Namibian Red Line, I have talked about it on my platform. The Namibian Red Line, the fence that was established or introduced in 1897 by the German colonizers, is still in Namibia. And this fence has divided the North from the South. You know, northern farmers have been marginalized as a result. They said it was to protect the cattle, but it ended up becoming, working to the disadvantage of the farmers on the northern side of the fence. So that line has divided Namibia. And this minister actually came out recently. I even celebrated him on my stories. He came out recently to announce that the fence, you know, they're going to work towards removing the fence. And a lot of Namibians rejoiced. You know, as the story kept developing, of course, the case around the rape accusation kept coming up. And it started seeming as if maybe, allegedly, that was the reason it was so passionate about removing the red line, because of this spending case. But in spite of all that, you know, I'm just happy that President Nandi is doing that which she said she would do. And justice for the victims. That is, if the case of him trying to bribe this now 21-year-old girl, if the case is confirmed, is just so sad. And yes, it's sad, but it's great for Namibia.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, you know, I think when you hold somebody at this level to account, I think it shows that you are thinking about this seriously and you're planning to take action, right? I think a lot of times there's a lot of lip service given to these kinds of things. Like, there's so many campaigns around protecting young girls on the continent, but there are so few people willing to actually take action when something like this happens. So him being arrested swiftly without bail, even though this case has been ongoing, this should have happened long ago, but it seems as though they're actually willing to move on it now. And so I think this is important, and this is literally living up to what she preached in her process of running for president. So with that, I want to move to the next story, and this is another more positive story. Just making history in Namibia, she actually announced free higher education for all starting in 2026. So no tuition, no registration fees, even technical training is covered. So while students in the US are reportedly drowning in $1.6 trillion of debt, Namibia, led by the spirit of youth activism, is choosing a different future. So this victory didn't come overnight. It's thanks to tireless student movements like the NANSO, Namibia National Students Organization, founded in 1984, in the fight against apartheid and colonial domination of education. Namibia now joins countries like Cuba, Morocco, and Brazil in providing that free education is possible and that decolonizing education is real. Living struggle. Now, I will mention that Libya also had free education at one point in time under Gaddafi, but he was killed. So they no longer have that, but that was something that they did have for Libyans all over the world. I don't know how many people are aware of that, but I became aware of that living on the continent. So I just thought I'd throw that out there as one of the countries that was in this list of countries that are offering free education for those post-secondary education. All right, so with that, we're going to get into this video and then we'll have some more commentary on the other side.
Pleased to announce that from the next academic year, commencing 2026, tertiary education will become 100% subsidized by the government.
Free education for all. Not in France, the UK, or the US, but in Namibia starting 2026. No more tuition fees or registration fees, and even vocational training centers are included. Secondary education in the country is already free. 2 of Namibia's 7 universities are state-run. The new policy is an achievement of the youth and the students of the country. Student organizations like the NANSO have long fought for affordable higher education. In 2017, things boiled over. Students threatened to shut down the government's student loan agency over late disbursement of tuition fees amid high inflation and unemployment. NANSO itself was founded in 1984, inspired by students' uprising in South Africa against apartheid-era inequality in education. The organization was anti-imperial to its core. It fought against foreign control and colonialism in Namibia's education. Now, Namibia follows in the steps of countries like Cuba, Brazil, and Morocco that also offer some form of free higher education. Meanwhile, student loans have reached $1.6 trillion in the US.
So, free education. That's technical schools and other forms of higher education. Your thoughts, Gloria?
Yes, I'm passionate about things like this because while some politicians throughout the continent are weaponizing illiteracy, are keeping the people uneducated so that when it's time for election, they can, pay their way through, buy their votes for peanuts, or just keep them, if you're not informed enough, you just won't know better. Right. That illiteracy gets weaponized. And here is a woman who only just got sworn in, and she's giving the people free education. She understands the importance of education. It's why you and I do what we do.
Right.
Our people need to be informed. And of course, thankfully, there are a lot of literate Africans, right? But because of the ruts in the system, many people or some people have been deprived of quality education, terrorism, all kinds of things going on. So it's so refreshing. And it's happened in, apparently Botswana also has free education. So yay, I guess, shout out to them as well. Yeah. Just seeing countries who prioritize things like this just says a lot. And watch Namibia fly. Keep your eye on Namibia. Namibia is about to fly because with this, oh goodness. And I will say to any Namibian listening, please take advantage because the education is free. This is a woman. I'm so impressed at how she's prioritizing gender justice. She's prioritizing education reform. That's accountability, social development. I love to see it. Do you mind if I digress real quick? I want to
go for it. No, of course.
President Hassan in Tanzania has been an oppressor.
Right. Also a woman, by the way. I think
also a woman. Right. It's only 2 on the continent. And I hope, and this is why I'm hoping, I don't want to sound like I'm speaking too soon, that President Nandi just keep, she seems like a really simple woman, just keep going, keep building this legacy. Because in Tanzania, President Hassan is suppressing opposition leaders. And she's been, Tundu Lissu, for instance, has been suppressed for years. She's been, anybody who criticizes her gets in trouble with her. Recently there were concerns around Tundu's whereabouts. As far his family and his friends were wondering, where is Tundu? This is a woman oppressing people in Tanzania. She's doing some good things, I'm sure she is, but as it relates to human rights violations, she needs to be called out for it. And it's just so disappointing, I want to see more examples of women, prove that when it's your turn, you can just, it's not about gender, right? But you have the opportunity to make such a difference. And this is what you choose to do. But anyway, on the other hand, we have the example of Namibia, where the president is for the people, and we hope it keeps going that way.
Well put. Yes, I don't have too much more to add, but to say I was fortunate enough to have a scholarship from the school that I went to growing up that helped pay for majority of my post-secondary education. Wow. I am looking at education in the United States. I went on a college tour with my nephew last year. NYU is $92,000 per year. Mm-hmm. These schools are, and the cheapest school we found was, as a 4-year institution, was $30,000 per year. I went to a private institution 20 years ago that was $20,000, and it was already more expensive than most other schools at that time. So to see how expensive, college has become in the United States, to see that folks are able to get an education and hopefully a quality one for free now, I think will be a game changer. And so I'm looking forward, as you said, to seeing how Namibia flies moving forward. Before we get to the next stories, I do want to read some comments that came in from some folks while we were talking about the earlier stories. So there was a couple of folks that just mentioned that I think he can unite us if we stand behind Traoré. The Real Source says the U.S. media would rather flood the news feed with sinners, NFL draft, and Shannon Sharp, all entertainment. We'll just leave that there. T says, I think we can unite if we stand with him because there's nothing that unites people like a common enemy. Love from South Africa. So T's from South Africa. Fred Bantu says, Malcolm X, they'll pay one of us to ill all of us. To say it was one of us. They will pay one of us to ill all of us, or, to off all of us, to say it was one of us. That is right. Nanya says, my and our ancestors continue to guide and protect. May our ancestors, continue to guide and protect Ibrahim Traoré, for sure. Pro Woman says, many are calling for the Congressional Black Caucus to make a statement in support of Traoré. No statement issued yet. There will not be one. Let me be clear. The Congressional Black Caucus will not be making any statements in support of Ibrahim Traoré. I think, I don't know if there was ever a time where the Congressional Black Caucus would be the ones to make that kind of statement. Unfortunately, they all happen to be of the same complexion and of what we call race, but I don't think they all are in support of an independent Africa in the way that all of us watching this are. So I wouldn't hold my breath for a Congressional Black Caucus statement. It's likely to be a statement of, you know, very like neutral, if anything, unlikely to be in support. Sunday says, if you want African to grow up, to grow up exportations, okay. Bravo to Traoré, God send your angels to protect him. And Jada Faith says, can we talk about Cote d'Ivoire, Cote d'Ivoire's role in all of this? So there has been some talk about the neighboring countries of the AES and their opposition to the AES, and they're cozying up to leaders in the West and potentially being involved in potential coups or supporting coups in the AES. I don't know if you have any commentary you want to give quickly before we move on, but it's something that I have seen. I'm not as well versed in this, but I do know that there's a lot of talk about it. So if you have any thoughts here you want to add, please.
Yeah, especially because the video of Michael Langley meeting with having a meeting in Cote d'Ivoire resurfaced.
Right.
Oh, and, you know, it's about the partnership that is so important to America.
Yep.
So that makes Cote d'Ivoire look funny, you know, like they tend to, you know, there's some historic situation there, but they're all allegations. But there are some things that are coming up, and we'll just keep our eye on that.
Fair. I think it's hard for us to speak on anything that we can't corroborate. We can't independently verify these things. So there are a lot of videos floating around the internet. People speculate. And so we'll do our best not to speak on speculation. We'll try to speak on just what is fact and what's been independently corroborated and reported on by people that we trust and we go to for the news or our own personal experiences, having spent time there. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I think that there's also another reason people are also suspicious is because the president who was ousted by Traoré is being hosted in Cote d'Ivoire.
Okay, well, there you go. There you go. So that leads to a lot of suspicion. Now, coming back to the U.S. government's role on the continent, Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, former candidate for the presidency from the Republican Party, brokered a peace deal for minerals in the DRC. So if you guys might remember, there had been some conversation about the president of DRC proposing to do a peace and weapons exchange for rare earth minerals with the United States. So there had been talks. Now there looks to be a actual deal in place. So it's progressed now. So he's brokered this peace pledge as of the 25th of this month, so a few days ago, or 25th of last month, excuse me, aiming to quote unquote end Eastern Congo's conflict. So the terms is cease support to armed groups like Rwanda-backed M23, respect borders, and draft a full deal by what is May 2nd. So if this is May 1st, so draft a deal by May 2nd. So the question is this is a hidden agenda? Because the deal promises the U.S. access to cobalt and copper, obviously critical for tech and electric vehicles and hydropower projects, while China's influence seems to be waning a bit. So there's a lot of skepticism. Past ceasefires failed. Fighting continued during signings of peace deals, and even just recently during this peace deal, there was continued violence. And so activists warn of mining sector abuses. Rubio's quote is, "Peace equals the U.S. investment opportunities." So we are going to watch a video and give some commentary on the other side.
Comments about.
Sorry, that is not the video. One moment. Let's get that video going.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio on Friday oversaw the signing by Congo and Rwanda of a pledge to work toward a peace deal that would ease U.S. access to critical minerals in resource-rich eastern Congo, bringing U.S. influence to bear in a minerals trade that has helped fuel conflict that has killed millions for 3 decades. Rubio's participation in the Washington ceremony with his Central African counterparts is an early step in what the Trump administration says is a rebuilding of U.S. foreign policy to focus on transactions of direct financial or strategic benefit to the United States.
Don't forget, follow.
All right, so I'll reserve my thoughts. What are your thoughts on this deal in the DRC?
What is the U.S. doing in the DRC? Didn't Trump say, I don't know what that is, of the DRC? You don't know what that is, yet you're somehow involved. Why do you have to be the peacemaker? Don't we have enough people in Africa? I mean, I know Ramaphosa and some, other people have tried to step in, but my goodness, it had to take America coming to get these guys together. What really is going on? We appreciate, you wanting everything to be peaceful, but we're very more interested in the motivations behind this diplomatic effort. We're talking timing. This is coinciding with increased global competition for resources, for African resources. So clearly this is very strategic yet again. And it's just, I think the optics are funny. They had to step in, to broker for peace. At the end of the day, they're just trying to get access. So it's all about access. And these are the things that, upset Africans even more when it's, again, yet another form of Western interference.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just add that, we're going to cover a story in a moment that speaks to the U.S. aggression and this particular administration's inability to use tact and precision. Right? They squeeze first, ask questions last, to quote a rapper from the 90s. But, honestly, I think one of the biggest issues that we find is there's a lot of incompetence in this group, right? Signal chats leaking, friends in different signal chats where obvious national security secrets are being shared. And these are the same folks in these signal chats that are going to, quote unquote, broker peace somewhere where they have no history, no involvement, no knowledge and understanding, right? I mean, yes, the Secretary of Defense was in the military, but he was a low-ranking military official. They fired someone who was a high-ranking military official who could have helped understand maybe some of these things so they could be a little bit more precise in these talks and how they execute some of these things. I don't know if I'm a fan of U.S. involvement in these situations anyway, because we almost always screw it up, and especially this particular administration understanding how they've been operating thus far, like just in the last 200 days, less than 200 days. So those are my thoughts there. I got a lot more to say, but I'll leave it at that. I don't want to sound too partisan, but that to me, I think is a problem. So moving on to the next subject of the United States and our involvement elsewhere. So that same signal chat that I was talking about, you guys might have heard the name, the Houthis, right? This is a group that they were talking about an airstrike on, like literally the day, the time, all of that was in this signal chat, which, by the way, had a reporter in the signal chat, right? So if people aren't familiar, Signal is a secure messaging service that technically is supposed to be secure, but you're not supposed to use this as a government official. You're supposed to be having these kinds of conversations in a room that's protected. One of them was in Russia having this conversation on Signal, or at least having it happen on his phone while he was in Russia. Others of which were not responding or responding, but nobody really pushed back except for sort of the vice president a little bit, and not even for the reasons that you should push back on this. So I wanted to give that context to then go into this story, because how does that impact Africa? Because this is Yemen we're talking about, but what does this have to do with Africans? So the U.S. airstrike kills African migrants in Yemen. So here's what we know so far. And this was as of 2 days ago, some of the most recent updates. So 68 plus African migrants, mostly Ethiopian, experienced loss of life in an alleged U.S. strike on the Yemen detention center. Now, to be clear, I think we have to say alleged, but there are people who are using Google Maps and posting on Twitter, this is a location of a Yemenis or Houthi, security center or whatever. And so some are alleging, suspecting that this bombing was based on intel that came from X, not Twitter, I should say X, like literally from X, not any national intelligence, from X. So 68 African migrants, as I said, mostly Ethiopian. The Houthis released graphic footage of the survivors digging through the rubble. The U.S. response is saying that they're aware of the claims, but won't confirm details due to quote unquote operational security. Now we have operational security. We didn't have it in the signal chats, but we have it now. So part of the Operation Rough Rider, 800 plus U.S. strikes since March targeting the Houthis. So this is first of all, Operation Rough Rider is a crazy name, but nonetheless, that's the name of the operation. The same facility was bombed by Saudi coalition in 2022. Migrants were en route to Saudi Arabia for work. And so these were folks that were en route to Saudi Arabia for work. It was a detention center holding folks that were, I guess, illegally in Yemen, right? So in the same way that people come to the United States to seek asylum, these are people who were held in a detention center because they were looking for work. We're not talking about necessarily people who were charged with being criminals necessarily. We're talking about folks who were going through not going through the proper means to become citizens in another country, and they went through Yemen to do that. So the UN is saying they demand investigation under international law. Activists, of course, are saying that, you know, it's another U.S. bombing that, without any rhyme or reason or without any real seriousness. So I will play a video and we'll have some more commentary on the other side. I know I gave a lot of commentary there, but we'll have some commentary on the other side.
Yemen's Houthi rebels have alleged that a U.S. airstrike has hit a prison in Yemen, killing at least 68 people there. This prison was housing African migrants, and Ethiopians and others from East Africa long have used Yemen as a route to get into Saudi Arabia for work. Now, as of right now, the United States hasn't acknowledged carrying out this strike, but it has said that it's carried out more than 800 strikes on Yemen since it began its campaign targeting the Houthi rebels there back on March 15th. Activists already have warned that this intense airstrike campaign was killing civilians, but the U.S. government hasn't acknowledged that, and this attack today is going to draw even more attention to those claims.
So for an administration that said no new wars, right? No new wars. We're not at, we don't participate in any new wars, no new bombings, etc. This seems to fly in the face of that. But I'd love to get your thoughts on this particular Operation Rough Rider and the 68 African migrants that experienced loss of life just trying to find work in Saudi Arabia and going through Yemen to do so.
Yeah, there should be more international concern around this, because we're seeing the vulnerabilities of African migrants in conflict zones on display, right? Mm-hmm. These are people who have very little control over the conduct of military operations. And Yemen has actually, historically, it's been a point for African migrants that are seeking for better opportunities in the Gulf states. So imagine the tedious journeys they have to go through, the exploitation, the detention upon arrival, and the conflict in Yemen involves various factions and a lot of foreign interventions. So these migrants get caught in the middle, all because they want a better life. And this is why I don't judge people. Some people are economic refugees. And when people have issues with immigration, my question to them is, what led to this moment to begin with? Right? What's going on the continent? Yeah, many African countries are free, but are they really free? That's why you have people, it's like, this is what's going on. They're migrating out of the continent in seeking for hope, because for them, they might as well die. Even if it takes dying, they're willing to make that sacrifice because They feel they're not alive anyway where they live. And it's
Mhm.
just so sad. These are migrants that are young, they're hopeful, they're desperate, right? And they're not leaving their homes because they want to. They're leaving because home has failed them. Or should I say the systems have failed their home, right? They're not necessarily, nobody wants to be a second-class citizen anyway. They just want to survive. Some of them are fleeing war, hunger, collapsed economies, extremist violence, climate disasters, all kinds of things. They're not trying to tour these countries. They're just desperately trying to get some relief. And for this to happen, you just get killed, you get unalived in someone else's war. It's just sad, from Africans drowning in the Mediterranean, dying in Yemen. It's just really heartbreaking. And if only our leaders will wake up and do what is right. Again, Africa has all it takes. The continent needs to be fixed so that if people choose to migrate, it's a choice. It's not an escape plan. We don't want Africa to feel like a curse. Africa is a blessing. Deep down, most people just want to be home. People want to be with their language, their food, their sky. But until all these problems get fixed, we will keep having these issues. And sadly, more people could be unalived along the way.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think that's why Ibrahim Traoré and the AES leaders have so much support internationally. And when I mean internationally, I mean across the continent and of course outside the continent of Africa. Because as you can see with every move that he makes or they make, it is with the country's best interest at heart. And everything is meant to be homegrown so that people don't have to leave, right? We don't have this issue of brain drain. And so, I think it's important that we started this conversation with Ibrahim Traoré, and you see the second and third order effects of people wanting to leave their country and bad governance for so long, right? So that's why there's so much support for these three folks. And it looks like some other countries are gaining some support of their people as well as they continue to engage with the folks in the AES. I know that we are basically at time, but I did want to run through a couple of high-level stories from around the continent that you guys can do some more research on if you'd like to. We didn't have a ton of time to go through each one of these individually, but we can talk about them from a high level, and then you guys give your thoughts. So the first is the DRC and Kabila's presidential immunity lifted. Does that mean accountability is coming? Can you give a little bit of context to that story and what is happening there in the DRC?
Yeah, so Kabila used to be president, and first term he did well. Second term, not so much, and then of course trying to stay longer, and now he's coming back trying to be popular among the people. My thinking is, okay, but how did you perform in your second term? So it's clearly a lot of tension there, and there are allegations of him siding with the M23 rebels. So yeah, this is a developing story, but it's clearly just a tension thing going on and people fighting for power. But I think some Congolese people feel that he may be a better choice because they don't think the current president is doing much. And he at least had that one term. Kabila had that one term where he seemed to have done well. So yeah, it's just a power toss.
Yeah, so, but with his presidential immunity lifted, it seems that there's a potential for him to end up as a political prisoner, right? Which is the challenge that we see a ton on the continent. Okay, so we'll stay tuned to that story, and we will continue to keep you guys updated on any major and relevant updates. So with Kenya, the cops who shot protesters, I don't know if you guys remember at the end of last year, there was some massive protests in Kenya, and they opened fire on protesters. So it looks like they're under investigation. Any other additional context that you can give to this story, Gloria?
Yes. So this was actually done by the BBC. There's been some investigation, and now human rights organizations are now asking for these investigations to be renewed after this BBC expose came out. So it exposed members of the security forces who shot dead 3 protesters at Kenya's parliament. And, Kenyans, like I said, they're so politically conscious that, they're going to keep holding these people accountable. And I'm here for it.
Absolutely. And then so Gabon, the AU lifts suspension after the most recent president's contested win. Can we talk about what this suspension was and what it might mean for Gabon now?
Yeah, I guess now that he's democratic, remember last week I was talking about how he just, going from military to a democracy shows that he's just trying to be president the right way. So
Sure.
I guess the AU at this point is just like, okay, yeah, you're unsuspended, you're very much legitimate. They've moved on. So Ali Bongo, you're definitely not coming back as Gabon's president.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's making noise for Ali Bongo. So moving on to South Africa, probing apartheid crimes. I think this is interesting. So can we talk a little bit about this? I'll just hand it over to you. The floor is yours.
Yeah, after independence in South Africa, it was more of, okay, let bygone be bygone, let's move on, forgiveness and all that beautiful stuff. But what Ramaphosa has been doing, of course, we've heard about the land reforms. Ramaphosa seems to be actively trying to undo some of the injustice from the past. Sure. And he's ordered an investigation to establish whether previous governments intentionally blocked investigations and prosecutions of apartheid-era crimes. So if anything, the survivors and the families deserve closure. So, I mean, imagine living with that for decades and you say, okay, yeah, I get it, forgiveness, but there has to be justice as well for people to heal. So, yeah, I'm happy this is happening, actually.
100%. Yeah, I agree. I think it's no matter how late, better late than never.
Yes.
Never late is better, but better late than never.
Yes.
Okay, so now moving on to Somalia. This is the last story. So they banned Taiwanese entry and backs one China policy. This is controversial, right? I don't know if you guys are aware, those who are paying attention. There's like the 3 T's that you're not allowed to talk about when it comes to China, right? So if it's in a movie or anybody who's in a movie, they will not play that movie in China. So Tiananmen Square, Taiwan, and what's the other T now? I've forgotten the third T. Tiananmen Square, Taiwan, and it's gonna come back to me later. But those you just don't talk about them. And when it comes to Taiwan, China does not recognize Taiwan as a separate country. Just like how Russia did not want to recognize Ukraine as a separate country, and it's supposed to be part of Russia. Taiwan is in a similar state. The United States has. Sorry.
Tibet. Sorry.
Yeah, Tibet. Yes, that's it. That's the third T. Yes. So Tiananmen Square, Taiwan, and Tibet. And so, as far as Taiwan is concerned, the United States recognizes Taiwan as a separate country. Many of the United Nations, etc., recognize Taiwan as a separate country. China does not. And so that is a point of contention. And the United States and other Western-backed countries have mentioned that they would offer military assistance to Taiwan if ever invaded by China. So just for that context, Somalia has banned Taiwanese entry to their country, right? If I'm not mistaken. And they're backing the one China policy. So can you give your thoughts on this backing of the one China policy and what's happening here in Somalia?
Yeah. So both countries have imposed entry bans for each other's citizens. And clearly there's a lot of teeth. There's a teeth going on. And it's all because of Taiwan's recognition of Somalia's breakaway region of Somaliland. So siding with China, and China and Taiwan with all the history going on and the conflicts, siding with China is choosing a side, and it's clear. And China is happy about this. They're in support of what Somalia did. So, yeah, I have concerns when Africa gets caught up in geopolitics that this is really far from home. And here we are, being caught in the middle, used as pawns, it seems. But yeah, I guess we'll keep our eyes on that one.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so any final thoughts on any of the stories or all of the stories? It seems like there's still some comments coming in about Traoré. I think people are very excited about that conversation from earlier on.
Yes, and they will also be excited to know, if they don't already, that the AES now has access to the Atlantic Ocean.
All right.
So they had a meeting in Morocco, and yeah, now they're going to be reducing their reliance on ECOWAS trade routes. So this will open new markets for their exports. And yeah, and you know, Algeria is also somewhere in the mix. You know, Algeria and Morocco have these tensions going on, but Algeria couldn't offer the AES what Morocco could, you know, which is access to the Atlantic Ocean. And yeah, so that's a major development with the AES.
Absolutely. And so I'm trying to figure out how I can find a map so that I could show that to people. You know, I'm looking for a way. I'm looking, but anyway, yeah, I mean, I think so. We're talking about this. So okay, here we go. And so it's still gonna have to go through Mauritania.
Okay.
I would imagine, right? Because Morocco on the other side here. We're now going through. We're now doing geography, African geography.
My geography is not. But anyway.
Okay.
But you know, they are landlocked, so being able to have access is very important, and it's progressive.
Absolutely. I'm trying to see if I can find a map that shows it, and of course, all the maps show portions, but not all of it. Okay, yeah, here we go. I think this is. Here we go. Finally, I found something.
Good.
Because that was tough. That was tough. So let me share my screen just really quickly. So just for context, right? Because we're talking about something, and we want to kind of share what it means. So let's see here. So here is the AES, right? These are the three countries, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. And then here is where Morocco is. So Mauritania is in between, but Morocco is now saying their access to the Atlantic Ocean is now available, to the AES. And so can we talk through what the story was, though? What exactly was the agreement that they came to?
So basically, the Sahel now has, so there is an initiative, right, that Morocco now has with the AES. The leaders actually met in Morocco to have this agreement completed. And what came out of it is that now they get to have access to the Atlantic Ocean, because Morocco actually, it's very central as far as the Atlantic Ocean is concerned. And collaborating with them is going to give them intra-African partnerships that help to ensure that their sovereignty is being respected. And it would also keep them away from traditional Western influence. So that's the deal with that. And, Morocco has been very pivotal with that. And again, it's geopolitics. It's the situation with Algeria. And I guess it's a game at this point, and the AES seems to be winning. I do like that it's a regional thing, going to Russia, going outside going to Turkey. Yeah, I get all that, going to China, but I always prefer when it's regional. So if we're going to have the regional war, in the name of geopolitics, let it at least be on the continent.
There it is.
The best win.
There it is. All right. So with that, I want to say thank you all for watching. We're a little bit over time, so thanks for being patient. Those of you who stayed on to the end, I will mention today is my birthday. I turned 41.
I was going to close with that.
So yes, and so I still go live on birthdays, because we wanted to bring this information to you guys. I think this is really important. Well, and then thank you, of course, for the birthday wishes. But yeah, so thank you guys all for joining and watching this long. If you stayed on to the end, we will be back next Thursday for This Week in Africa. I plan to be back next Monday for Pan-African Perspectives. So stay tuned for that. I will be coming back with a story, which I don't know what it's going to be yet, but stay tuned. I will not be in these United States. I will be in West Africa, and I'll tell you where I am when I get there. So stay tuned for next Monday's live stream, and then stay tuned again for next Thursday's This Week in Africa live stream as well, where we bring you next week's stories. With that, thank you, Gloria, again for doing this.
Thank you,
And thank
Joe.
you guys all for watching. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, follow us on all platforms. Remember to do that. So go follow the Gloria AO on all of her platforms, and then follow Authentic African on all of our platforms. So with that, thanks for watching. See you guys all next week.
Bye.
Bye, guys.